Good evening from Mumbai, India. Good morning, good afternoon, from wherever you are in the world, and welcome to this webinar. It's my privilege to welcome you as the coordinator of GENSA, the Gender and Equity Network South Asia. As you know, it's a special interest group of the community of evaluators South Asia, and that includes a number of countries in the region. Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. As many of you know, and those of you who have attended the GENSA webinars, we are dedicated to promote the gender and equity issues in South Asia for both evaluators and gender specialists for a socially just society. But today, we are very excited to announce that together with the Evaluation Observatory, EO for short, which promotes knowledge exchange by engaging with an array of decision makers, practitioners, and thought leaders. Today, we bring two like-minded networks together, GENSA and the Evaluation Observatory for the very first time, and we're really excited about it. As you know, GENSA webinars are organized by a core group of young and emerging evaluators. And I'm going to request Vijita, who is on standby, to walk us through the session today. Please take it over, Vijita.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Gender and Equity Network South Asia, or GENSA, as we call it in short, is a network of 200 plus evaluators based in South Asia. We began our journey in 2020, and we regularly hold webinars every 2 months. We want to make this a go-to network through hosting informative and cutting-edge events. In case you're interested in any topic or issue or would like to present, write to us at gensanetwork@gmail.com. In case you have not joined our network already, we would request you to please join through the link provided in the chat box. As mentioned, we are already 200 plus strong and want to expand our membership base. We are also looking for volunteers from all the South Asian countries to be a part of our task forces and request you all to please write to us in case you are interested. Also do find time to visit our website, gensanetwork.org, for more information. Now, coming straight to the webinar, we ask the important question today. Are we walking the talk in gendered evaluations for human rights? More specifically, we will explore the intersection of gender and human rights through exploring some key questions, such as, is gender mainstreaming in evaluations enough to promote human rights? How is the spectrum of gender mapped in different policy and program contexts? And what are the current challenges, especially with respect to COVID-19 pandemic? What evaluator program stakeholder dynamics lead to creating tangible impact for gender-based programs and social policies? In short, what more needs to be done by the evaluation community to truly walk the talk in creating sustained, equitable development for women? I would now like to invite Avani Kapur for sharing the opening remarks. Avani Kapur is a fellow at the Center for Policy Research, where she leads a research group known as Accountability Initiative, working towards more responsive governance. She has over 13 years of experience in the area of governance, state capacity, and public finance. Avani is an alumnus of the prestigious London School of Economics and Political Science and Smith College, Massachusetts, USA. Over to you, Avani.
Hi, thank you, Vijita. I won't take too much time and I'd like to come in the end. So I'll just start with saying, welcome everyone to this really, really important discussion today. I think in any policy cycle, evaluation is often seen as the last arm, but evaluation is as good as the policy design, the policy implementation, and as well as how researchers and evaluators like all of us think about it. So I'm really looking forward to today and learning a lot from Dr. Kala and Ms. Renu ji to some of their ideas and thoughts and some of their work around gendered evaluation. What does it mean? What should we be careful about? What should we be thinking about? And what is the current social policy space? How ready is it for having this conversation, and what can we all do about it? So I'll hand over to Dr. Kala to go ahead with her presentation.
Thank you so much, Avani. Let me invite Dr. Kala Peiris. Dr. Kala Peiris is the Director of Center for Women's Research and the Sri Lanka Center for Development Facilitation. She's a university lecturer and has more than 25 years of experience in the development sector. She's the first Sri Lankan female Eisenhower Fellow. She holds a PhD in Business Administration and an LLM in Intellectual Property Rights. Welcome, Dr. Kala.
Good evening, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. Now, going straight into the topic, it's not actually a topic. I've been given a question. Do gendered evaluations promote human rights? Now, my basic premise of this in terms of entering into this dialogue would be to ask ourselves as evaluators who we are, where we are, and what are we trying to evaluate. My premise of handling the question is to ask ourselves who we are as evaluators. What do we try to evaluate? What are we evaluating? In that context, are we addressing the women's rights in a way that we capture and highlight and voice out our concerns within the paradigm of human rights? Now, basic, whatever the definition or the explanation of human rights would be, to treat everybody equally, to live in dignity, freedom, equality, justice, and peace. But you and me, with all our work, with all our years and years of experience, being men and women in the society, we know that we live in a gendered world, where we experience different forms of discrimination, vulnerability, tears, sorrows, difficulties, voiced out and not, captured within the system and not. Now, in such context, what do we do as development workers, stakeholders in the development sector? We try to work in our own niche. And as I mentioned earlier, identifying the areas of concern where gender-based discrimination, which becomes the priority for us in our projects, we try to make a change, to bridge the gap, to address the vacuum, where we believe every woman would have to live freely, live without being faced in becoming a victim in violence, slavery, discrimination, right to vote, a fair wage. In situations when we don't see that is happening and we feel that there is a responsibility of intervening to make whatever the change, we talk about women's rights. We tell the world, we raise our hands, we bring our voices together, and we kind of signal the world saying, look here, women's rights are being denied. We have to work on the women's rights. How do we bring about women's rights within the paradigm of human rights, us as being evaluators? In a broader perspective, we talk about gender equity and equality in our interventions. We kind of focus all our activities to assure gender equity and equality, and to create a push, create a voice to say, look here, women's rights are human rights. So as evaluators, that is why I said that my premise or the entry into this dialogue is to ask ourselves, what do we evaluate? When we give our recommendations, what do we recommend? To promote women's rights? And do we go one step beyond, kind of consider the broader perspective of the change which we are challenging for, or asking for, fighting for? Women's rights within the paradigm of human rights. Saying that, Now, what do we evaluate? We try to understand the comprehensive understanding of social structures, which creates power imbalance, discrimination, and social norms and stereotyping, and the discrimination within the economy, education. We are trying to say, okay, fine, being women, socially enforced norms based on the gender differences, well, rights are being violated. So women do have rights. In that case, women's rights are being promoted. In that case, women now you see the challenges here, right? And this is exactly what we are talking about. The same voice, same volume, same frequency to be maintained. And to say women do have rights, but consider whoever trying to tarnish, whoever trying to distort the voice of women are violating their own rights of human rights. There is no world without all of us together. So saying that women cannot be stopped, we try to look at women do speak without slides. Women do work without all this fancy equipment, and women are empowered. So in that case, what are we trying to talk about in the development initiatives? We look at women's rights and we talk about gender-based discrimination. How do we go about? What happens in terms of women and in terms of development workers? We do work, whatever the challenge it may be. India, Sri Lanka, around the world, women cannot be stopped. Discrimination, marginalization, trying to push you out of the stream, but we would not, right? I was talking about in evaluations. Now, when we see discrimination, vacuums taking place, in the development world, we intervene in culturally, if the prevailing legal system is not wrong, economy is not healthy for women, education rights are being denied. What do? We intervene. And when the projects are being implemented, these projects are being implemented to address the practical and the strategic needs. You and I are most of the time evaluating when it comes to projects. We are evaluating those projects which kind of focus towards attending to a practical needs or the strategic needs identified in a given context. And when we do that, we call ourselves to be gender responsible evaluators. We kind of follow a process which is gender responsive, right? And what do we do there? We try to promote accountability, gender equality, human rights, women's empowerment by telling the organization, well, look at your activities, look at your objectives. This is how you have done. So gender responsive evaluation on a contextual perspective, we do contribute to human rights. But let's take one step further. Gender responsive evaluations leading to feminist evaluation. What do you mean by feminist evaluation? The focus of, or the central focus of feminist evaluation is about, to address gender inequities, which would lead to social injustice. Now, in feminist evaluation, it is the bigger, larger picture, which goes beyond that project, which would emphasize participatory approaches, empowerment, and social justice agendas. And talking about feminist evaluation, researchers have said that feminist evaluation is more fluid, flexible, evolving, because you talk about the bigger picture. Then we also talk about qualitative research and social injustice, which is like the larger, bigger picture, which would kind of have an impact on the overall discrimination, vulnerabilities experience throughout human evolution. So feminist evaluation would not stick to some of those standard formats and structures which we use in evaluation, which is very important for us to understand. from gender responsive evaluations to go that, that extra mile of looking at the larger picture, which would not restrict us only for that given milestones, targets, and that logical framework of a project. Now, saying that, I have to answer my, no, I said I'm not going to answer, I'm just trying to generate some kind of a dialogue. Question is, do gender devaluation promote human rights? Now, in gender devaluations, we look at 5 main areas, whether the activities or the interventions are relevant, the relevance of the initiatives, efficiency, how efficient, I mean, in terms of calling for change, initiating change, how efficiently the intervention had impacted upon the selected group or the sample beneficiaries, and then the effectiveness. Have we done the right thing? And are we to expect the expectations, whether the expectations are being met, impact and sustainability? My point is to answer the question, do gender evaluations promote human rights? In our evaluations, we do talk about relevance, efficiency, effectiveness, impact, and sustainability. And going back to my basic premise, gender responsive evaluations, we look at the relationship between men and women, sex and gender, in a given context, which would marginalize, deny the rights of women. In order to understand the denial in the given context, what do? We look at gender roles. We look at gender responsibilities. We look at the triple role. And we talk about access and control of resources. We talk about practical and strategic needs. We also talk about intersectionality, being women, the diversity being women. Women with disability, women from different ethnic background, poor women. We look at the intersectionality and we talk about conditional change. And then in terms of changing the status. So in gendered evaluations, we have a particular structure because we are looking at where the discrimination is, happening and the cause of marginalization and vulnerability, inequity. So in that case, in our gendered evaluations, we consider men and women, sex and gender. Now, truly, we contribute to women's rights, and there we understand where the vacuums, what should be done, what should be proposed in terms of as a bridging process. I was trying to make a point in my previous slide. What about feminist evaluation, which is more about the larger, bigger picture, which is more about the conceptual understanding and integration into the human rights perspectives. Now, I see that is an area as evaluators we can promote. From gendered evaluations to capture this larger picture without stopping ourselves from by looking at the project objectives and the targets. Then we also now answering the question, to gendered evaluations promote human rights? If we really want to be very effective in our evaluation, in terms of answering this question, how successful or how effective our evaluation practices, we may really have to address, some of the practices which we have been following for a long time. I see that there is a mismatch in practices and recommendations as well. Now, the project itself would have larger, the goal would be much bigger than what is being implemented, but that's okay. You can only, even if you throw out, I have been believing in this, throwing one starfish back into the ocean, you at least save one. So likewise, the small initiative, within that small initiative, creating hope to look beyond your whatever that periphery. Gender evaluations to be better oriented in promoting human rights. I feel we have to readjust our views in terms of aligning project objectives and activities and deciding what exactly are we to evaluate. Then addressing practical and strategic needs in answering the question. Do gendered evaluations promote human rights? It does. Gender responsive evaluations towards feminist evaluation. We are at a stage, I believe, that we have to take down all these tools which we use. Logical framework, results-based monitoring, power mapping, resource mapping, and to adjust and to map it out with the theory of change. Now, nowadays, in any project, we talk about a theory of change. The theory of change is a broader, it would cover a broader area for, it's for sustenance, it's for a long-term change. So in that case, in our evaluations, the tools which we use, which would promote women's rights, and in order to move one step further to add value to our dialogue, I feel we have to kind of address and to conceptually understand what feminist evaluation means, which would help us to re-emphasize that women's rights are human rights. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kala. Now, next, I welcome our next speaker, Dr. Renu Khanna. Dr. Khanna is the founder trustee of Society for Health Alternatives, or SEHEJ, as it is popularly known, and has mentored community health and women's organizations. An Erasmus Mundus scholar, she has taught at KIT Amsterdam and QMU Edinburgh. She is on the governance structures of Jan Swasthya Abhiyan, Common Health, Health Equity Network India, and is a commissioner on the Lancet Commission for Gender and Global Health 2020-22. Over to you, Renu.
I am going to begin with the same question that Kala answered. Do gendered evaluations promote human rights? I begin by first asking the question, what are gendered evaluations? And I think that's something that Kala was also explaining. And to me, evaluations that integrate gender equality concerns into the objectives of the evaluation, into the methodology and the approaches and the use are gendered evaluations. Evaluations that incorporate a gender analysis, which examine policies and programs through a gender lens, which means, and what does this mean? You know, we use these terms very frequently. Use the gender lens. What do we mean by that? So we ask specific questions like, to what extent is this policy or program or project promoting gender equality? Is it examining gender power issues? Is the policy or program gender transformative? Kala spoke about gender responsive programs and policies. And she also went a step further, and going beyond gender responsive would be gender transformative, which means that it would be changing the gender power relations which exist in society and gender power relations that a program or policy is attempting to address. So my answer is there. In 2 slides, I can just finish my presentation by saying that yes, gendered evaluations do promote human rights. And the answer is that gender is a human rights issue, which is what Kala also was spelling out. Gender inequality is a violation of the right to equality. Gender as a system is violating human rights, the right to equality, to non-discrimination, to dignity, to bodily integrity, to self-determination, and also to life in many cases. And if we incorporate a gender perspective in evaluations, we would actually be promoting human rights. So this is my proposition. So I want to go beyond answering of that question to also what would we as gender transformative evaluators or feminist evaluators do when we are faced with the task and the challenge of evaluating gender responsive, gender specific programs. So I'm taking two examples. One is the menstrual hygiene scheme of the Government of India, which is gender specific, and the Ujjwala Scheme of the Government of India. And the Ujjwala Scheme, I will talk a little more about that and describe that scheme to you. So the menstrual hygiene scheme, what is the context within which this scheme is being introduced? So I'm citing two small studies, and there's a lot of literature available. I'm not going into everything, but this is a study that my colleagues in Sahej did just recently in the lockdown period. We did life stories, reproductive stories of 14 young women between the ages of 18 and 26. And this is what we found, and we exist in a fairly developed state. The state of Gujarat has very good indicators, economic indicators as well as health indicators. And this study was done amongst the urban poor young women. And so the context is urban, not even rural. And half of the respondents said that they knew nothing about the menstrual period when it came the first time. It came as a shock to them. The source of information for these unmarried young women were representatives, community animators from my organization, Sahej. And for the married respondent, it was through a friend. 12 of the 14 respondents shared beliefs and rituals followed during menstruation. 5 of them said that their mobility was restricted when they started menstruating. And we had quote after quote. We had narratives which described the girls' traumas. These are, 12, 13-year-old girls. And the first time when they faced the menstruation, the kind of scare, anxiety, and trauma that they go through. And this is from Nepal. This is a traditional practice in Nepal, a cultural practice of Chaupadi, which isolates girls and women for 14 days when they are considered spiritually impure, depriving them of food. They're put out of the house. And there are changes. The government of Nepal enacted a law which banned this practice. But the social discrimination and cultural and religious superstitions, gender inequalities continue to affect women through menstruation. So these are just two examples of the literature which exists out there. Many of us who are in this room together today will know very closely the kind of life changes, restrictions that young women and older women face during their menstruation. So this is the context in which the menstrual hygiene scheme was first introduced in India. In 2011, it was a pilot scheme, and in 2014, it was then upscaled. And the stated objectives, it's important to note these stated objectives. The first one is to increase awareness amongst adolescent girls on menstrual hygiene. Second is to provide high quality sanitary napkins. And the third one is to ensure safe disposal of sanitary napkins in an environmentally friendly manner. But in effect, when you see what's happening on the ground, the scheme is reduced to making subsidized sanitary napkins available through the Jan Aushadhi shops. Jan Aushadhi shops are people's medicine shops where generic medicines, good quality, low-cost medicines and supplies, medical supplies are made available. So this is what this scheme is reduced to. Now, I, as a feminist evaluator, what would I do if I were to examine this program? My analysis would be that it addresses gender-specific needs. It's an important scheme. It is fulfilling certain aspects of women's right to health, accessible, affordable, sanitary protection during menstruation is a big thing, and that is happening. It is beginning to reduce the silence around women's bodies and menstruation, the taboos and the stigma around women's bodies. But there are other questions that I would be asking. What is this program doing to address information needs of girls before the onset of menstruation? Is it doing anything at all so that the trauma that I was speaking about is prevented or is decreased or is lessened? What about rights to dignity, freedom from stigma, non-discrimination? Is this scheme also talking about and debunking the notions of pollution and purity, which lead to the discriminatory practices around menstruation? How are girls and women engaged in designing, implementing, and monitoring the scheme? And what about men's and boys' involvement? Does the scheme promote this explicitly? If it is to be gender transformative, is this aspect looked at? These are just a few questions. There would be many more as a feminist evaluator that I would be asking. Let's move on and look at the next scheme. The next scheme is of the Ujjwala. And what is Ujjwala? Ujjwala, the Prime Minister's Ujjwala scheme, was launched in 2016 to distribute free gas cylinders to below poverty line women. Now look at this picture. Look at these photos. What this scheme is doing is actually perpetuating and reinforcing the existing sexual division of labor. Now, this is a very interesting little film.
हमको बहुत तकलीफ होता है जी, लकड़ी ले आना पाथ कर उसको सुखाकर उसको चूल्हे में जलाकर धुआं धक्कड़ लगता है। न पैसा कहाँ पाएंगे कि हम हर महीना भराएंगे। 520 रुपया उस समय हम लोग को दिए हैं, तो 500 से 800 रुपया, 800 रुपया, 1000 रुपया, 1000 रुपये से 770 रुपये लग रहे हैं।
उज्ज्वला योजना में लगभग 30% लोग जो कि गैस रेगुलर लेते हैं, बाकी जो अदर्स कस्टमर हैं, सामान्य कनेक्शन वाले हैं, वो लोग 50 से 60% लोग जो रेगुलर गैस ले रहे हैं।
So we see actually what is happening, subsidized gas cylinders for below poverty line women, not looking at the intra-household distribution of resources, economic resources. Women do not have the money to replace the empty gas cylinders and go back to the cow dung. If you look at this picture, this is about one state in India, Orissa, And the 2020 figures are saying that 61.4% increase in LPG penetration in Odisha. But look at this. This is a newspaper picture and an article of 2021, July, which is showing the gas cylinder lying in the corner of the house and the stove lying on top. So this is repeating that same story. And I will tell you the similar research that we did in Gujarat, we did in Odisha. And I will tell you some of the unintended consequences of this scheme. Every time a family gets a free gas cylinder connection, they move into the category of above poverty line. So all the other benefits that below poverty line families are to get, they are deprived of those. And families are actually renting out their gas connections to earn some income. This is what came out in our little study. So once again, as a feminist evaluator, how would I look at the Ujjwala scheme? The scheme, as I said, is perpetuating gender division of labor. It is addressing practical gender needs. So there is great potential for reducing drudgery of women. Some other questions that I would be asking is, to what extent has the scheme achieved the stated objectives of reducing women's drudgery? And we saw and there are numerous, I mean, I've just shown you two little vignettes of where the drudgery has not actually reduced. Women have gone back to their drudgery. But I would also ask the question, to what extent has the scheme progressed to meet women's strategic gender interests? So if they are not stopping the whole chore of bringing back firewood from the forest or making the cow dung cakes, and if they have time available, is it then going into productive activities, and is their status increasing? And what does the scheme have inbuilt to take care of the strategic gender interests? How is the scheme designed to do that? That would be my question. So in addition to the effect on women's condition, has the scheme impacted on their position? Has the scheme had any effects on changing sexual division of labor? Has the scheme had any unintended consequences? And I just spoke to you about two unintended consequences. So human rights and feminist evaluations, I believe, have a common set of values and principles. Equality, non-discrimination, dignity, bodily integrity, all of these, self-determination, compassion, interdependence, these are common sets of values and principles. Additionally, feminist principles of participation, of reflexivity, of learning, of collaboration, sharing of power, collective leadership are additional feminist principles. And so let me go to my last slide, where I am asserting that all human rights-based evaluations are not necessarily feminist evaluations. However, feminist or gender transformative evaluations do promote human rights. Feminist evaluators would examine how policies and programs address practical gender needs, and how can these be explicitly designed to progress to address strategic gender interests. And feminist evaluators, I believe, would also ensure participation and voice of those being evaluated at all stages of the evaluation process. Thank you, and I look forward to a rich discussion now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Renu. This was really, really wonderful and insightful, both what we heard, Dr. Kala, as well as you. So let us begin to Dr. Kala. The first question is for Dr. Kala. Why is it important to discuss gender and human rights in the SDG era? Is the question for you, Dr. Kala.
From Millennium Development Goals to SDGs, where we kind of try to rectify the mistakes made and to envision a better future for the whole world within 17 goals, where specifically we consider gender inequality under Goal 5. Gender cannot be restricted to goal 5. Gender is cross-cutting throughout all 16 other SDGs. So in that case, we are trying to reach whatever as I mentioned earlier, to rectify, to correct the prevailing discrimination and deterioration of the society materially, as well as within our value system by addressing the corrective measures through 17 goals. And we talk about women and gender disparity in goal 5, but it is not only within goal 5. Gender is cross-cutting. Therefore, SDGs all within all 17 goals. Women, men, and gender-based discrimination and the disparity prevails. So in that case, gender-based discrimination, disparity, and trying to understand where we go wrong within the environment, up in the air, under the ocean, all around us. Understanding this gap, the vulnerabilities is important. So in terms of addressing SDGs from a gendered lens, evaluating where we are, trying to locate ourselves within these recommended goals, targets, milestones, within the indicators, localizing these targets to our own context is very, very important. We look at we address the bigger picture. And in our small, whatever the corner of the world, we all have the same rights within the human rights paradigm. If you are to lift that statement from the shelf and to make it live and to generate life on human rights, all 17 goals should be addressed from a gendered lens. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very important points. I think, Renu, you want to say something? You want to add to that?
Yeah, I want to say that, SDGs ka tagline is leave no one behind. And if we take that seriously, and if we interpret gender not just as men, women, but also gender diverse people who are not counted, who are invisible, our data sets do not reflect their issues. So from that perspective, I feel that it is extremely important that SDGs start considering gender and gender in all its wider understanding and more comprehensive understanding. We need to have evidence generated about issues of the LGBTQI people, and because once the data is there, then we'll be able to make policies and programs for them. So that was my response to that. I think Avani asked a question about are there designs of genders? And what I want to say is that I think organizations are learning. Evaluation, when done properly, is an opportunity to learn about what the gaps are. And I want to give an example of, for instance, UNICEF's programs on wash and menstrual hygiene. And in the last strategic plan, the program was gender responsive and not gender transformative. And learning from the evaluation, they built in, strategies which would take them towards gender transformation. And some of the strategies that they included was participation of girls and women and boys and men. I've learned a lot reading about this program and the evaluation and the program. And to me, that is one example of how gender transformative programs can be designed.
Thank you so much. I think we have quite a few questions now suddenly. There's one, I think, which is more general, but I think even I would want to understand from your experiences, both yours and Dr. Kala's, as evaluators, how often do you see a gender lens being used in evaluations?
My whole thing is that I feel that evaluation, I mean, our policies and programs are gender blind, you know. Large number of our policies and programs are gender blind, or at best, they are, as we've been saying, you know, addressing practical gender needs. They may be gender specific. So I think it's too much to expect evaluations to be gendered, you know. I think it's a growing field. Many of us, like today in this room, there are many of us who are interested, who are committed to this idea. So it's a growing field, and I think it'll be a growing practice. But at the moment, I think we need to build our capacities of how to do this, and to also build the climate outside, the culture to accept gendered evaluations. Many times it's all trivialized, you know. Feminist evaluation, how is it different from any other participatory evaluation? How is it different from development evaluation? You know, so these are the sort of questions that we've been asked. And so I think an understanding of gendered evaluation and the value addition of gendered evaluation, the climate, the environment has to be built for that. And I think that's a struggle which we are all in together at this point in time.
Thank you. Dr. Kala, your take on this?
In Sri Lanka, being in the development sector for a long time, what I have seen is truly we use the gender lens in evaluations, but now we have come to a stage that it has become a requirement to use certain tools. My previous question was, how much scope and opportunity we create to look at the broader picture. Now, most of, let me put it diplomatically, some of the interventions which we implement, the projects, are time-based funding. At the end of the funding period, it doesn't continue. Advocacy processes, campaigns, where is the empowerment envisaged? And what I wanted to discuss I had some slides to discuss diagrammatically to say, we look at how many women have come for the trainings, how many interventions and the situations, the interventions made. The aspect which is most qualitative, which should get inculcated, integrated into the system, into our system and to our blood. Whatever happens, we don't turn back. The thought process. Are we really evaluating that and making recommendations to go with the, to look at to capture the bigger picture? That was what I was trying to explain. So anyway, when there is an evaluation, we do use these tools. Obviously, that gives insights to do things better. But psychologically, conceptually, to the evolutionary process of change, addressing the evolutionary process of change is about equality and inequities. So this broader dialogue to make you feel, own, and to be part of the process, the transformational process, is very much to be emphasized. And as evaluators, I think we really have to think about it, which goes beyond these standard structures. And that is what I was trying to talking about the theory of change. Theory of change is, excuse me for saying this, but it has become the fashion of, present time fashion. We put up a theory of change. And we have activities aligned to this theory of changes. Now what happens in our evaluations, if we can look at the activities against the theory of change as evaluators, if we can make the whole thing to look beyond those activities, I think we would be adding much to the system.
I invite Avani for, just summarizing and taking us through some of the key takeaways from this wonderful discussion that we had. Over to you, Avani.
Thank you so much, Bijita, and thank you everyone for such a fascinating and interesting discussion. I'll try and summarize and also just tie back to some of the questions that were coming up in the chat box as well. I think one thing that was clear from both the presentation was that power matters. Gender inequality isn't just about redistributive inequality, but it's also about relational inequality. And I think it's really important to recognize it and ideally design evaluation that address it. I remember sitting in a home in Uttar Pradesh where we were discussing with an ASHA worker. One of her roles was ensuring family planning activities. And of course, she was having these discussions with the women of the household. And I asked her that time that, do you have these discussions with men? And of course, it's really hard. And she did say, as a woman, it's really hard to have those discussions with men in the household. But that's where it becomes complicated, right? It is about, you're assuming that the women have the agency to have control. And unfortunately, that's not always the case that exists. And so just remembering that it's also so much about relational inequality and the power imbalances. And I think Dr. Kala, your presentation also talked about it, and Renuji, so did yours. So I think that's something we all need to keep in mind. The second important feature I think that came up, and I think Dr. Kala, you spoke about theory of change, the famous words or the famous phrase that all evaluators keep in mind. And I think you laid it out really well, that a good gendered evaluation needs to keep in mind that gender lens throughout the design. And so it's not just that we come in right at the end or just at the beginning. You have to think about it in the way that you're approaching it. So your methods, your approach in the design, even in who's asking those questions, and throughout those steps, it's important, because any evaluation needs to look at who gets what, how much, and how that varies across classes and social groups. And I think someone talked about the fact that, can we make this discussion broader? And I think one of you said this point, that gender is something that comes across social groups, across vulnerable groups. So it's not a social group in itself. I think it's cross-cutting. And so people sometimes tend to be even more marginalized, keeping in mind some of the discrimination that they face. I think the other thing that I think that again is coming out throughout is, don't forget the stakeholders. I think, as the name suggests, stakeholders are the ones who have the stake. And I think, Renuji, in your the menstrual scheme design as well that you spoke about, were the women actually talked to when a scheme is being designed? And often we forget those that for whom the schemes or the programs are being designed. And in that process is when we end up having either unintended consequences. Someone talked about a Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana that is designed for, it's a maternity benefit program, but who actually gets that benefit? Have you had that discussion with women in the households? And I agree that it is starting, but I don't think that we are there yet. Another point that I think is very close to my heart, and it came up again, and someone talked about the data. And often the data is skewed towards women. Often we don't have enough data. So that's another thing that comes up. And as evaluators, I think it's our role to ensure that not only do we collect a lot of the data that is sometimes missing, but how do we also enable putting it out as much in the public domain, of course, with privacy and identify is removed, just so that these discussions and debate can continue. And so that we're not just dependent on the data that exists, because sometimes we have to make the invisible visible in our evaluations as well. So I think to sum up, I think it's essential to walk the talk. And Renuji, you said it well, that unfortunately, currently, often our policies are gender neutral. So as researchers, as evaluators, as implementers, we have a difficult task ahead of not just doing evaluations that are gender friendly, but also pushing the policy cycle in some ways to think in a more gendered way. So we all have our work cut out for us, but hopefully together we can walk the talk and continue conversations like this, which are really important to pushing the narrative forward and learning from different people's experiences, but also having these important discussions. So thank you so much, both. Thank you both so much for wonderful presentations, and to the audience as well for asking tough questions of the presenters. But I think all the questions were getting me thinking as well. And hopefully we can continue this conversation ahead as well.
Thank you so much, Avani. That was wonderfully summarized. Thank you so much for that. We would now like to thank the Evaluation Observatory for partnering and working together on gender and rights, both these issues that we deeply care about here at GENSA as well. Let me now hand it over to Sabina Matthias from the EO for a vote of thanks. Sabina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Brigitte. I really wanted to actually give a loud shout out to GENSA, to Sonal for partnering with us and setting the way, lighting the torch for all partnerships when it comes to all such knowledge partnerships. To Vijita for chiming in and doing a wonderful job moderating. Kala for such grace under such ludicrous circumstances. Thank you so much, and still staying on agenda. That's obviously ultimately what we always hope for. And Renu ma'am for bringing this wonderful conversation right back so that Avani can talk to us about how ultimately we need to actually broaden what we understand as social policy. This has been a wonderful session. And I truly, truly admire all the speakers and the collaborators that we've had here, because you've all come together in an immensely strange time. And the times are strange and our circumstances were stranger, but thank you for coming together and staying so focused to our commitment for greater gender diversity and equity. Thank you all again for the wonderful audience that stayed, that participated. Please do come back for our next webinar. We're always fun. It's never boring here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.